Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and since 2010, I've interviewed hundreds upon hundreds of songwriters about the writing process. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So I've always been interested in treating songwriters the same way that we treat poets and traditional prose writers, as writers, plain and simple. There is no talk of how bands get their name, favorite tour stories, favorite foods, band drama, or anything else. This is an intelligent conversation about the writing process between two writers as we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process. That's it, nothing else. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, we have Calum Hood, bassist for 5 Seconds of Summer. I had on his bandmate, drummer for 5 Seconds of Summer, had on Ashton Irwin a few months ago, so check that out. I will link to that in the pod description. But anyway, back to Calum, bassist for the band. His his debut solo album is called Order, Chaos, Order. And before I go any further, I want to say he's the first songwriter to ever reference the great Bill Murray Scarlett Johansson movie, Lost in Translation, as inspiration. And if you've seen the movie, it's a great movie. You can totally see how that movie would be inspiring for many types of artists. But back to the chaos thing. He called chaos a friend. And I love the idea of chaos as a friend to the creative process. I'm a prose writer, not a songwriter, as I always say in these interviews. But I think the biggest mistake an artist can make is adhering too closely to a structure. Chaos in the process, the non-linear part of the process, allows you to make detours, to go around down different avenues you normally wouldn't if you adhered too closely to a structure. So I love the idea of chaos in the process. I think it can produce fantastic results no matter what kind of writer or artist that you are. But we did talk one thing, and he talks about anxiety a lot here on the pod as well. And he said normally he's an anxious person. So if he goes a few days without writing, he starts to wonder what's going on. You know, when will I ever write again? When is it ever going to happen? And when that happens, he kind of goes to mindfulness. And we discussed that part of the process as well. So anyway, the new debut album, solo album by Calum Hood, is called Order, Chaos, Order. And here is my interview with Calum Hood, bassist of 5 Seconds of Summer. So I always like to start with a pretty simple question, and that is, are you the type of writer or artist, I should say, that thinks it's important to create every day in some fashion? Or do you feel like pushing it when you're not really feeling it can make things become too derivative?
I believe that, my approach isn't so linear. There's definitely been times where, I come from a very working class background. So like grafting is a part of the culture, so I believe where I am today, where, the band that I'm a part of is today is solely, it's 80% of hard work. It's the hours where you're in the studio where no one else is. It's the times that you push for, you question the lyric and you push for the a greater melody or whatever that is. But now coming into being in my late 20s, it's all about patience and allowing the space for ideas to come to me and to speak through me. So I can see both sides, but right now I don't write every day. I like to be able to miss something, songwriting's such a big part of my life. So if I do it every day, I kind of lose the context of what that is and what role it plays within my life. But yeah, I've definitely gone through intensive periods of, every morning, right after you wake up, write however many words. So I believe in both. It just depends on, where you are.
So when you have the patience, if you're in that patient frame of mind and things aren't happening, do you start to get anxious, feeling like, wow, I haven't written in a few days. What's going on? Things aren't happening. And I guess if they're not happening, are there things you do to kind of force the issue?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm naturally an anxious person anyway, so, when the thing that you're supposed to be that is your job and you're not, you're not feeling kind of like the work part of that, it starts to I start to go, "Oh, no." Like, can I even write a song? Like, can I even write lyrics? It starts to, take over your body a little bit. But that's when, mindfulness helps me is like just to relax and just to create. I mean, creating the space for, to be able to um, even think is a hard. I'm like always thinking or thinking about writing or thinking about writing lyrics when I'm actually doing it instead of just kind of, doing it and observing quietly.
When I was a professor, I told my students that's a great way to look at it. That if you think about the writing process is only happening when you're actually writing, you'll be full of anxiety. But if you're thinking about, hey, my writing process is taking place as I'm eating, sleeping, walking, working out, anything like that, that brings that would always bring me as a writer also that sense of relief that, okay, I'm not writing, but something is always happening up there. And I think I've kind of hear that's what you're saying a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I think right now I'm just in at the point in my life where, I'm just not trying to force the issue. I'm really trying to just be a vessel to because I believe like, there is some sort of universal consciousness that everyone is kind of like pulling ideas down from. And everyone, the ideas that I write, that someone else writes, I believe that, the same sentiment has been written. And it's just kind of like our purpose to write them from our perspective. Um, so I believe in that essentially. Yeah.
I've actually got a quote here that that you had said about this is from the press release for the recent album, and I this really stood out to me, and I'd love to just discuss this because you said I started out with a vision order, but quickly became overwhelmed by the process, which was chaos. And again, I'm a big fan of that idea that we are not, and I think you already mentioned this, that we're not linear thinkers. And when I don't think I have any right knowing what something is supposed to look like before I start. And I co-wrote a rock memoir last year. Mark Morton from the metal band Lamb of God. He's a good friend of mine,
Wow.
and we co-wrote his memoir. And where that initial idea of the book was so different from what the final product was. And the biggest mistake I think an artist can make is thinking, I'm here, I'm going to get there, and here's how I'm going to get there. But I always think chaos is a strength because you have to have a process that mirrors how we think. So I'd love to
Wow.
get your take on that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you said it so beautifully. It's going to be hard to follow that up. Um,
Well,
yeah,
why do you think the chaos worked for you? Because chaos, I feel like, is one of those words that isn't doesn't have a positive meaning, but
totally.
but it's strength, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think before, entering this album process for me, chaos was probably, used in as a negative connotation, but um I think, you know, it holds hands with order, and I think, one doesn't exist without the other, and as so do a lot of kind of opposites that occur in my natural life. But I think it was definitely scary because as you said, like I had such a strong idea of what I wanted everything to be. And I was obsessed with it. And I was like, this is how I want people to see me. This is how I want people to perceive me. I was almost like making the decision for people of how they were going to receive my art. But when I got in the studio with Jackson, who kind of, produced a lot of the album, I just realized like, wow, I just had this all wrong. And it kind of like it forced me to let go of these preconceived notions of who I thought I was as a songwriter, as an artist, as a person. And, when you're left with that kind of, you're in between worlds and you're not really sure where to go, like that's a scary place to be, especially for someone who, I mean, this is my first solo album as well. So it's kind of like, um, my first imprint of how people are going to get to know me as an artist as a by myself, and I was like, oh shit, I don't know what that is. So that was like terrifying, but you know to be able to let go of that, to be able to let go of you know I'm not really sure what it's going to be, how it's going to turn out, but I know there's one thing that I really asked myself a lot during this whole process was why. It was like, why are you doing this? Why are you showing up every day? And one of the big reasons was because I love songwriting. I love being an artist. I don't really want there to be another day where I don't consider myself one of those things. And as soon as I kind of, um, you know, got comfortable with that feeling, um, the chaos really became a friend of mine. I was like, oh, wow, it's creating things that I never thought I would be capable of creating. Um, and so really like the order in that way became, more negative leaning. It's like, oh, I don't really want the order is not serving me as much as the chaos is serving me right now. And then it cycles.
I think and again, I've never written a song in my life, but as a prose writer, I feel like order doesn't allow me to make detours. It doesn't allow me to take chances and say, do I want to go here or do I want to go there? So on the song level, though, how often were you doing that when you're writing songs? Are you, were you applying that chaotic idea, thinking, I guess, how often were you saying, this is the way the song's going to be, or did a lot of songs on that individual level also have that chaotic element to them too when you're actually writing them?
Yeah, I think they ended up kind of like holding hands in the end. Like I would be firm with like, how I wanted certain things to be, but be like, loose. And especially when you're collaborating, you like need to be certain type of open to the other collaborator so they can have their imprint and, do what you put them in the room to do. Um, but I think like there were definitely different approaches that I took that I had never really took before. Writing this album for myself, I think I got to a point where there was a little bit of stalemate and I was getting a little hungry for more of what I could offer as a writer. And I thought, maybe I could switch my approach up. So there was times I read about Brian Eno and David Bowie. They would write separately in different rooms and then they would come together and they would show each other the songs that they wrote, and that sometimes they would, both songs would come together. Sometimes they would focus on one idea. So we kind of took like that approach where um, we settled on some references. We chose a key. We chose the BPM. And me and my good friend Elijah, we wrote the top line and the lyrics without any music. And Jackson wrote the music with his headphones on. And then at the end of the day, we put them together. And that became one of the songs on the album. And then there's other songs like Streetwise, which is totally influenced by um, there's a documentary about these kids in Seattle. I don't know if you've seen it, about these kind of renegade homeless kids that, they leave home when they're early 13, 14 years old, and they kind of go out on this big adventure for themselves. And, one of the songs was totally inspired by a scene in that documentary. And there's countless different ways that I took that, you know, taking pointers from other pieces of art and letting that inspire me to create, you know, um, a byproduct of that. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that right now because Ernest Hemingway always said he would say writers should go to art galleries to get inspired. So it's funny because whenever I mention that to songwriters, they say something about the paintings inspire them, but some others say, "Oh yeah, the titles of the paintings inspire them." So um, other types of art? You already mentioned one, but how often does that happen? Other types of visual art, anything that directly inspire you as a songwriter?
I love like visual media, like movies. I really love. I take a lot of influence from movies. Like we would play, um, you know, I think we were playing. What's that movie with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson?
Lost in translation.
Lost in Translation. We would have that running and then kind of create the track around, this montage of Lost in Translation to kind of like fit the mood of, you know, of what that movie is, because I think that movie is so like beautifully shot and it's so somber as well. Um, and yeah, as I was saying before, like allowing other pieces of art to influence you. But um, I also think like uh, poetry books as well. I take great influence from. It's kind of like different, like soloed parts of the media that I get to do in my job, like just the visual or just the words, or or just I love soundtracks as well, like movie soundtracks, and take great inspiration from that too. So yeah, there's a lot.
All right, we got to talk about poetry since you mentioned it. And I've had a good string of luck recently because most songwriters never read poetry. So I've had a
Mhm.
good stroke of songwriters who have telling me that they actually love to read poetry, which is makes me feel, optimistic. So, um, yeah, so we'll just talk about poetry. I'd love to ask you about poetry and literature in general. Um, who do you like to read? Are you a genre person or an author person? Who are your favorites?
There's actually this um Australian guy called Darby Hudson. I don't know if you've heard of him, but I honestly found him on Instagram, and I I honestly just love when it feels like I'm in the room with the person and they're kind of just like, writing down their non-filtered thoughts. There's something so special to me that when someone really bears their truest self, I really gravitate towards that. My first kind of poets that I really got into were Michael Fordett and Lang Heave. I think that's how you pronounce their name. And the amazing thing about them also is that they're a couple, and that's kind of like, the dream is like, you become this kind of creative force with someone else and you're constantly feeding off each other. Um, and then there's also Jim Harrison. There's a lot of like, I think it comes from, growing up in Australia. There's like an honesty that when I read someone's poetry, and it's really honest. It really doesn't matter how colorful the language is. I really just resonate with, what is the true meaning of what um, they're trying to say. So that's what really draws me in as a reader. Um, yeah.
Are you mostly a poetry person? Do you read fiction too?
For some reason, I can't read fiction. I just can't, like, it's too, you know, I need like I need some cement somewhere. I can watch fiction, like I love Lord of the Rings, I love Harry Potter, but I just can't, some reason it can't keep me in my place for long enough for me to indulge in it. So I love autobiographical stuff. Like I'm always reading about like music artists, um, and um, that's like the same with my music. Is like a lot of it's autobiographical, and then it can kind of like take more of, you know, as the song progresses, it can take more of a fantasy, view where you can kind of like go off into a world that is kind of next to it, if you know what I mean.
All right, let's get very specific about the process now. So, when you write, are you a pen and paper person or a computer slash phone person when you write lyrics?
Ooh, yeah, I've tried all of them. Um, I'm definitely I think I'm a phone person. Sorry. Cool. I think I'm a phone person. But I write down things all the time. Like here I just have like all these bunch of notes that I'm just kind of like scribbling to just like try and get out of my head, but it's the thoughts that I want to separate myself from. Um, and lyrics, I kind of want to like keep them. But when I was younger, I didn't really write anything down. Everything kind of, which was funny because when I was listening to your podcast with, with other people, I always thought, man, I'm so different. Like I used to like, keep everything up in my head and like never used to write anything down. And then I listened to a lot of other artists and they were like, yeah, I do the same thing. I was like, oh, damn, just another guy. um, but yeah, there's something really like, um, there's a connection between you and writing something down physically, that's totally different to you writing something down on a phone, which I also value.
Well, practically, I've read research that shows that students at universities retain information better when they use a pen, take notes with pen and paper versus a laptop. So,
Interesting.
yeah, there's research behind that. That's why they say something about that connection to the brain. It's a different part of the brain involved more closely with memory. I think so. Practically, um, it makes sense. But those notes you showed me, are those just random thoughts? I mean, do you journal at all, or it's or no?
Yeah, I journal definitely. I go through like intensive periods of journaling and then I switch off. Like that's kind of like how everything goes in my life. Like, it's almost like some sort of therapy where you learn and then you implement and then you learn and then you implement. But these are just kind of like, yeah, these are like I even have one for today because I was freaking out because I've terrible anxiety. So I'm just like, just write down everything that, I wanted to get out of my head so I can feel it come out of me. And it kind of like, as you were saying, like you retain the information a little easier. And I don't have to like just have it all in my head, just waiting to, you know, say.
So, are you writing this? I'm interested in this because you showed me it looks like to be like a bunch of papers rather than like a notebook. But it seemed like a notebook would give you much greater organization.
And, and you know what? You're probably right. Look, I have so many notebooks that are just kind of like I can't really stick to one. I can't really finish one. Like I know a lot of people that they go, "Look, here's my notebook and this is from 2016 to 2017," and they're all finished and I've like feel like I've just always started one and I've never really finished it. So this is like kind of my erratic way to like it's a lot simpler just to write on a singular piece of paper for me than to have a whole notebook.
Well, I was going to say and I do hear there's some songwriters often. The advantage of that is that it makes it less precious, because if you're writing in a fancy, songwriters fall into two camps: those that have to use a fancy notebook, and others who just find whatever scrap of paper is around, because that gives you far less anxiety. If you don't make the process, it makes the process less daunting. If it's like, oh, there's an envelope here, I've got, I'll write on that. So I can see both ways, but I do hear a lot of them say that the more precious they make the process, the harder it is, ironically, to write. So that's why those fancy notebooks don't really help them.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the first time I've heard that, and I, fully resonate with that for sure. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like um yeah, confidence and it's a heavily emotional and psychological thing, I think, songwriting. And when I'm feeling really confident and when I'm feeling great, um I feel like I'm a far superior songwriter to when, vibrationally I'm a little, lower and a little sluggish. So um maybe I have to try that.
Is it hard to write? from places of, is it hard to write about difficult things? Some people, if you're writing about difficult topics, personally, is it hard to write about those things, or is it that you feel an urgency to write about things so that the words flow more naturally?
That's a great question. Um, yeah, for me, it is quite difficult. Especially if you're saying it pretty directly, where it leaves kind of like no room for imagination for a listener to, you know, interpret what song's about or what's going on in your life. So that's why like it makes it easier for me to use language to help me kind of, you know, build something that can create another environment for people to listen to a song and create a space where um the listener can decide for themselves what it means rather than, directly telling them. But in saying that, there's other songs where, it's best to serve the purpose of the song and to say it as simply as you can. Like, I feel like that's a big part of my process that I've just went through is like to discover what the true meaning is, to say it in its simplest terms, and then you can kind of build the context around that. You know what I mean?
I had a songwriter tell me once that their biggest challenge was hacking their brain to become less critical as they write. That seems to be the thing that songwriters always tell me. I had one, Matt Nathanson, tell me that he calls that thing the assassin. The assassin is that thing on his shoulder telling him not to write this thing. Don't write it, don't write it. But that seems to be a constant struggle. I hear that a lot of becoming less critical as you write, just getting it out there. I learned that from there's a novelist, Anne Lamott, and I reference this essay all the time. But has a great essay called "Shitty First Drafts," and she says whenever you write anything, the first draft has to be shitty. The biggest mistake you can make is trying to
Wow,
perfect it
interesting.
along the way. So is that a struggle for you or a problem? Like as you're writing, um, trying to become less critical?
Yeah, I'm glad I'm really finding my community within within the songwriters that you've had on the podcast. Yeah, definitely, and it's as there's a lot of training of the mind, like, and these are more kind of like songwriting is kind of a byproduct of how I live my life. Like there's at times where I've I've really placed a lot of my value in songwriting, and as I've gotten older, um, it's become more living wholly, and then songwriting kind of feeds off of how I'm living.
It's about being less critical. So is that I know, I mean, I'd love to say that I'm not critical, but as I write, there are times and I think, should I write that or shouldn't I? So is it a struggle for you as you write lyrics to be just to get rid of, as I said, the assassin, to hack your brain to become less critical as you write, just to get everything out there, not worry about how it is as you write it?
Um, yeah, I've become a big believer of um, if not now, then later. So there's multiple songs where that I've written that will always stay, in my phone or on my laptop. But there's countless songs where I've come back and taken a lyric or taken a melody or taken a chord progression or something like that. I always feel like it might not be for now, for your taste for now, but it could be a part of something that is, that is bigger. So I agree with the notion of like you have to you have to release it. You have to get it out of you.
So okay, so those old ideas, you go back to those old ideas, are you going back to them because you're looking for something or like, "Oh, I need a melody, I need something. Oh, let me go see what I have." Or is it, "Boy, I really need some ideas. Let me go through the old ones." Does that make sense? I think there could be two reasons why you're going back to those old ideas.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's always like, oh, I can't really seem to get this lyric, or I can't really seem to kind of portray what I'm trying to say um, as well as I want to. But I feel like I know I have in the past. There's songs where that I've written where I'm like, this is I think this is amazing, but it's really just for me, And I think creating for yourself is so important. It's like there's no external validation or whatever, but there's parts where I'm like, I I know the song that I've written and I love these lyrics. So let me just go back and see if they somehow um align. And I was even listening to old songs yesterday that I've written, just like really shitty recordings. And there was a lyric that I heard in one of the old demos, and I was like, "Oh, I went back and used that for a song um that I'm releasing." And I was like, that's one of my favorite lyrics on the record, and that wouldn't have happened you know, if I didn't put down those ideas that I had before.
Okay, so I have this discussion with songwriters all the time because they tell me there are thousands of voice memos in their phones and of ideas, but there's no organization to them whatsoever. So they're just scrolling frantically to finding that lyric you were talking about. So fess up, is there any organization? You're nodding. None whatsoever.
No, no, yeah, you'd be scared. You'd be scared. It's just my street name and then the number, which is like 678 or something. And then I'm like, oh, what was that idea that I had a few days ago? And I'm just kind of like, I mean, most of them, out of most of them,
Hey, Nick and Lauren.
there's just like so many kind of, I'm just mumbling into the phone as well. It's like, it's not very flattering either.
I know. I'd love to say I talk a big game. I have no organization to mine either. So now I I posted something yesterday because I love to hike and go on walks, and I find nothing more inspiring than being out in nature. And I don't think I've talked to any songwriter who has ever said to me, when I want to get ideas, I stare at the wall. Everyone says the benefits of going out and walking is a great way. And I know that you have tons of plants behind you, but do you often use walking, being outdoors as a way to get inspired? Or maybe does it inspire you even though you didn't know it was going to?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a huge kind of underutilized tool for songwriters to be able to, because we all sit in the room all day, and it's like you're in the room for 12 to 16 hours and you're all hunched over your phone and you're all, trying to crack the code. And but yeah, whenever I'm like really stuck, I usually drive. I like to go for drives, always at night. Like it's really rare that I'm riding when the sun is up. For some reason, I like when the sun goes down and everything. The world goes to sleep, or at least LA goes to sleep, and things are way quieter. I've like way more space to think. It's like everyone's in dreaming about whatever they want to dream about, and yeah, and I hop in my car and I go for a drive, and sometimes I listen to music that inspires me, or sometimes I'll just sit in the silence. And there's something really therapeutic about that for me.
So I actually have a quote by David Byrne up here on my screen from Talking Heads, and exactly what we were talking about. He says, "A car is a good place to write lyrics. Driving occupies one part of the brain, freeing up the other." So, but I think it has to be now. Now, hear me out on this, because I feel like if you go and drive in unfamiliar places, you got to be thinking about where you're going. But if you're driving in a place that you've been to many times, your brain can kind of open up because you're almost on autopilot. So when you're driving, are there familiar routes that you're taking?
Yeah, there's one route that I always take, and I have it dialed down to a T now. I know exactly how long it takes, and but that's so funny because I was thinking the exact same thing when I was driving yesterday. I was like, this is how writing should feel like. It should feel like something that's so familiar where you don't have to think about it. It's autonomous. but there's also that part of your brain that's kind of observing it and, and saying, you know, well, don't turn left here or else, or blah, blah, blah. There's like things that, it's saying to you. I feel like that's, uh, that's really cool that he said that.
Well, a lot of things. I mean, when I go on hikes, if I'm doing a technical hike, I'm not thinking creatively. I'm thinking about, I've got to step on that rock in the right way so I don't break my leg and fall. But if I'm walking on flat terrain where I don't have to worry about those things, there's a big boost in creativity when I'm not having to think about actually where I'm going. So it makes sense
Mm.
and I always give this quote. This is one of my favorites. And Agatha Christie, the writer, famously said, "The best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes." So the songwriters who tell me they get ideas where they are gardening, folding laundry, cleaning, vacuuming. There's a lot of that research that shows, and it's why we get our best ideas in the shower, that when our brains are engaged in unconscious activities that require no thought, that's when those ideas bubble up.
Well, maybe I need to start cleaning a little bit more. That's that would
But see,
be
the problem is that once you do that, though, see, now I've ruined it for you because you're gonna start to clean. You think this is the time, but it's and that is the challenge. It's putting yourself in those situations where you're not thinking about, okay, now I'm driving, now I'm cleaning. The ideas are going to come, but it's those eureka moments.
yeah. Yeah, and I honestly I often get that um when I'm outside like having a smoke or something, like there's one song on the record where it was missing a full chorus and I was just having a cigarette, getting ready for the day in the studio and I was like, I just really don't know what it's going to be, but I feel like that's okay. And then as I was finishing the cigarette, like it just comes to you. I don't know what it is. It's just like it's almost like a gift in a way where, you don't even question it. You just kind of know um, that something will come. I don't know if you
But
have experience.
no, I do, but that's what I'm talking about is I think that the second you have to be receptive to these things happening at any time. But when I'll go walk the dog, or it's those times, drives, long drives. And that's what you're talking about is that they happen when your brain doesn't have to focus on the task at hand and it can open up. I mean, I've heard things like chopping vegetables, cooking, anything that requires you to be on autopilot. That's when the ideas happen.
Yeah, and I agree. And like, as someone who's in a band and like songwriting is such a big part of it, like everything is kind of doing everything to be able to write the song, if you know what I mean. Um, so anything that I feel like can help me switch off or can help me engage or be better as a songwriter, like it's kind of like the great purpose for me. So yeah, those kind of like mundane in quotation marks activities, like I actually really enjoy because I feel like I actually should be kind of working a 9 to 5 job actually, and somehow this whirlwind has brought me in, and it's like, well, now you're in a band, and now you write songs, and now you like, you can do all this cool shit. Um, so I actually really enjoy like, even though cooking, I feel is like, that's creation it's in its simplest form. I really enjoy those moments of just peace and quiet. I can't really go to. I know. I think I saw something about Elliott Smith. He was like, "Oh, I write in bars and stuff." I can't. I just can't do that. Like my mind, there's too much happening. I need like maybe a tea house or something. Something a little quieter. I can do that.
But all I'm thinking is look at the space around you. It's serenity. I mean, the colors, the plants, and I hear that. I hear them from songwriters and writers too. They need the hustle and bustle. For every songwriter who says they love the home in the country, there are those that say they've got to be in the middle of New York City to be able to write because something about the activity inspires them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely agree. There's a part of me where that friction it can create some really great outcomes. Um, and there's been times where I have been in environments like that, and something great has come from it. But I guess there's like two, and I don't know if you come from the same place, but there's two parts of my brain where it's like I write well when I'm really comfortable, and I write well when I'm really uncomfortable. Um, and somewhere in between, is where I kind of get lost.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common that when you're in and when you're at steady state, you're not really, how can I say this? When you're in that steady state, you're not aware of your existence as much as you are when you're in that euphoria or kind of the depths, right?
Wow, that was
That's
yeah.
pretty deep. I just made that up. That's pretty deep. I have to say, I've never said that before. I kind of surprised myself. I'll be honest with you. Let's just sit with that for a minute.
Yeah. So yeah, can you repeat that? Because I mean, I'd love that.
I think that when you're in a steady state, you're not aware of your existence as much as you are when you're in euphoria or in the depths. And I'm trying to think about how that
yeah.
relates, to my life. And I was having this discussion with someone else, and oh, I know, I was talking about hiking, and I said when I hike and I'm in the middle of a place where there's nothing around, and almost those, if you're flying over the US and you fly over in the middle of the country and you say, wow, like who even lives around those places? Like I've hiked in those places, and you're aware of the fact that you are living when I'm there are certain hikes I go on where I'm aware that I'm living, and where I'm aware that that I exist. That's it's kind of a hard thing to describe. I hope it makes sense, but um I I mean, I there's a place in California, Pinnacles National Park, and it's in Northern California. It's about an hour and a half south of San Francisco. And it's only the two places in the country where the California condors, an endangered species, exist. And there's
Wow.
like 30 of them. And they're these enormous birds, but they're incredibly ugly. And they were almost extinct, but the government brought them back. And they still have ways to go. But every year I go out there to California for work, and I'll go spend a weekend hiking in the park. And the first time I saw the condors, um, and again, they're incredibly ugly birds. But the first time I saw them soaring overhead, got very emotional. I started to weep because it was this sense of being aware that you exist.
Wow. That's beautiful. How am I supposed to follow that up?
Well, I where was he even going with that? I know, but I think it's the idea that what you said is pretty common. I mean, if you're not aware of your existing, what is it to write about? But we write in those moments of the depths and the heights rather than just the steady states because you're not really aware.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And that's like, I think there was a point in my, you know, songwriting career where I think I was feeding off a lot of that the depths, the depths, and I was constantly pulling from the depths. And there was a point where I just came to myself and I was like, man, like I'm not sure if I can conceive myself wanting to be like happy, you know, because I like that's such a creative energy force that I'm pulling from. Like if I go to the other end of the spectrum, like will I lose that? I think that was such a big part of, um, growing up. And this was like maybe when I was in my mid 20s, and I think there had to be a point where I just said to myself, like, I need to live as a person and as a creator second, you know. Um, and now I'm like, I'm always pulling from either end. I feel like it's something that you kind of learn, and also like you can pull from the middle as well. Like one of my favorite songwriters, I feel like Tom York does that a lot. He makes the most mundane things sound incredibly beautiful or depressing, and when I listen to those songs, I'm like, I'm definitely existing right now. Yeah.
That's what poetry does. Poetry, that's why you love poetry. I feel like I'm a therapist here, but that's why you like poetry, because poetry takes the most mundane ideas and shows them to you in a way you've never thought about.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love that about lyricism. So like, doing the writing every morning before after I wake up, before I do anything else, kind of really helped me to get to that place easier where I could dive deep into, you know, um, more colorful language, or being able to kind of articulate what I wanted to say easier, or better than I would have if I didn't practice that. And also, like, with writing, there's so many lyrics and melody, and there's space, and there's obviously like the composition of, there's so many ways to communicate something. Um, I feel like sometimes even not saying anything, letting the music talk far is a far like better way to even say what you were trying to say in the first place. Um, so that's like a lot of the times, I'll create the track first and let the track speak. And then I'll resonate with what I feel like the track is saying. And I'll just kind of um, mimic what the concept of the track is kind of telling me.
One quick follow up to that is the songs that come quickly to you, are you less likely to touch them to revise them?
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. There's something about the purity of that moment that I want to keep. Um, and I find that really precious, and that's like, when I'm on my deathbed, like, those songs will probably come to mind, the ones that were, you know, the simplest to write, the that came the easiest. Um, but yeah, you smiled. Do you do the same, or?
I mean, again, like when I no, but I think I'm a prose writer and not a songwriter, so that's different. I think like I said, my whole thing is get it out no matter how bad it is.
Okay.
So I write furiously and quickly, fully expecting I'm going to go back. It's a different type of writing, but I think that, yeah, it's more about just kind of furiously getting, because I'm terrified that if I don't get everything down immediately, I'm going to forget it. So I mean, if our kids happen to see anything I'm writing, they're mystified I have a job, because it's nothing but squiggles from spelling and grammatical mistakes. I don't care about any of that stuff. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not, because I'm so terrified that if I don't, like, if I'm getting an idea and another one comes to me halfway through, if I know where that first idea is going, I'll stop that cold and go right to that next one.
Yeah. There's almost something really. I think that's why I reconnected with that kind of process of, like, not writing things down, in this album. And there's something so beautiful, if you don't remember it, then it's just gone. It's just gone. And I think that's amazing. It's almost like, oh, you weren't supposed to have that one. There's another one. Um, and yeah, there's something about that process that I really resonate with, for sure.
All right, so let's end with this. So I think you mentioned that you like to write late at night, but
Mhm.
then I thought I heard you say you write sometimes in the morning. So, is there an ideal in time of day? Is there? I love these questions because we all have these quirks. Like, I never write and revise in the same place. That's my one thing. If I write in one chair, I'll never revise in that same chair. It's always got to be somewhere else. So, is there a favorite place you like to be? How important is the actual ritual to you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important. I have a space on my couch, and it's kind of like at the end of the couch, and I'm kind of like snug up against the coffee table, and I have my guitar in my hand, and I'm sitting diagonally, and it's almost always after, you know near or after midnight, and the lights are really low. Maybe there's a candle flickering. Um, and it's, as I was saying before, it just feels like it feel it feels like I'm the only person awake. So I'm able to access more because less people are. I'm doing the hand thing again with the songwriters there. I'm able to access more because people aren't necessarily, um, grabbing as well. So I just find it easier to connect.
Okay, so you mentioned guitar. I'm getting really specific with you on this because some songwriters tell me when they have that guitar, they're either sitting or they're standing or they're walking around. It sounds like you just sit pretty much the whole time. Are you ever walking around or no?
No, not really. I mean, sometimes if I really can't find something, I'll walk. I'll get the momentum going. Um, you know, I've sat upside down on the couch sometimes. Um, if I'm trying to, find something specific that I just can't find, I change the way I approach it, to try and get a different outcome. To try and um, you know, pull it out of somewhere else.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can find all the episodes on all major streaming platforms and also at the Songwriters on Process website. That is at songwritersonpodcast.com. Pre-2020, this was not a pod. I was transcribing all of the interviews. So you can find all of them, hundreds of them, many hundreds of them on the Songwriters on Process website. You'll find both the transcribed interviews and the pod there. Take a deep dive, spend a day. These are great conversations with songwriters just about the writing process. Also, my book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, is out now worldwide on Hachette Books. You can find it online in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God, and it's his memoir. Again, that is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari. I am biased, but that's a damn good book. My email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I love suggestions, questions, comments. People always email me and tell me who they want to see on the pod next. You never know. Send me an email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. That's it for me, everyone. Have a great day.